Welcome to our weekly class on Beneath the Surface, where we analyze some deeper writings from a Kabbalistic and Hassidic perspective on important topics within Judaism as such. And currently, we're dealing with the art of giving, what it is that tzedakah, the act of contribution to others in need or otherwise, where does that come from? And why is it the word tzedakah from tzedek? Not that it's charity, which is commonly translated, but rather that it's something which is obligatory, something which is a responsibility, something which is justice. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. You must pursue justice. So the word for the giving process, which we commonly call charity, in Judaism is called tzedakah, a derivative of responsibility as an act of justice. So we're looking at a deep philosophical discourse by Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch. Now, you know the name Menachem Mendel as our Rebbe, the Rebbe who passed away, the most recent Rebbe, the seventh generation of Lubavitcher Rebbes. His name was also Menachem Mendel. But this discourse is actually by the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, and his name also happened to be Menachem Mendel. Now, if you'd like to have a copy of the book in front of you, I have a few copies left over. By all means, contact me and you'll be able to get hold of one. Otherwise, I'm accompanying this presentation with notes that have been sent to you, and you can download them and print them as such for each session. The notes we're going to deal with today actually cover the next couple of sessions. Now, what we've done is we've looked at the beginning of what is called the first chapter in this particular discourse. Discourses were given orally, and they were then recorded afterwards. In this particular edition, the publishers conveniently divided it up into chapters, although it was one continuous oral discourse as such. Now, what we've raised initially in this particular maimer, which is the Hebrew word that's used for discourse as such, is the question of a quote in the Talmud. A quote in the Talmud that says that giving of every single cent, smallest denomination, onwards and onwards, throughout a lifetime, adds up to a large sum. Meaning that there seems to be an emphasis on giving a large sum as tzedakah. And we have questions that are raised on that. Why does it have to talk in terms of a large sum? After all, we find, and the Talmud quotes this, that Rabbi Eliezer would every morning before going to pray, he would go onto the street and find someone to give small denominations, a cent here and a cent there, to help people as such. So we can see there's an emphasis on the giving of even the smallest of denomination, and there seems to be an inherent implication in the Talmudic quote that a large sum is worthy in its own right. Why is it? We know that every act of giving of tzedakah is a mitzvah in its own right. And we mentioned last week in the Kabbalistic system that when a person carries out a mitzvah, especially a mitzvah as important as tzedakah, which we are told tzedakah is equal to all the other mitzvahs put together, figuratively speaking, what happens is we draw from an infinite energy that's drawn down from Or Ein Sof, from the infinite source of godliness, and it flows into the first realm known as Atzilus, and then in the 10 Sfirot of Atzilus, it flows down to Malchus of Atzilus, which is the lowest level of the high realm of Atzilus. Remember, there are 4 realms: Asiya, Yetzirah, Bria, and Atzilus. So we're still talking way up there. When we draw down to the lowest level of up there, it becomes known as Shekhinah, Malchus of Atzilus. And you know the word Shekhinah as feminine side of godliness. It means that which ultimately comes down and nurtures us all the way down through all the realms, through the Bria, through the Yetzirah, and through the Asiya, down to you and me here, right here. So the act of giving tzedakah causes a very major cosmic reaction that benefits the world at large. That's the act of tzedakah, what it achieves. And every cent that's given individually has its own merit and causes this dynamic. So the question has been raised, why is it that there's an implication that a large sum is very worthy, as if to suggest that the totality, the sum itself, is important and more worthy when it's large. And we sort of reassure people who give small amounts, don't worry, it'll add up to a large sum by the end of your life. So there is an inherent contradiction. Is it the large sum that we're emphasizing, or is it each individual act that causes the dynamic cosmically that is itself important? And how can the two coexist? So these were the questions that we raised last week in our session last week. So you can go over that. And if you want the notes, if you haven't received them, then by all means contact me. So I would like to turn this class and possibly the next one into looking at a summary of this whole matter in context of Sefer Tanya. And I find in one edition of the Tanya called Lessons in Tanya, on page 391 of the volume number 5, a wonderful summary which I'd like to preempt the next study of our Art of Giving text, because it provides us with an overview of a very complex subject matter. So just having a look on your notes, page 391, we look there at the summary which I've just given you in terms of the contradiction that seems to exist. Turn to page 392. And you'll see in the third paragraph, in brackets, here the Tzemach Tzedek quotes the entire text of our above letter of the Alter Rebbe, which is what we are going to study and look at in our discourse itself when we turn back to the Baimer as such. And with all its explanations on both the revealed and esoteric planes of Torah to demonstrate the superiority of piecemeal giving. In other words, we're going to be looking at how, in fact, the giving of tzedakah, piecemeal, cent by cent, is in fact superior, and yet we have to contend with the issue of the total amount as such as having some worth in context of value of Torah and mitzvahs. So he says, does this not conflict with the attitude that leads the sages to go so far as seeking a proof text to reassure us that many individual coins may be considered to be as valuable as one large sum? So if we're going to, again, raising the question, if we're going to conclude that the sum counts, what about the value of the individual 1 cent, which elicits all the wonderful effects from above and is a total mitzvah in its own right? So the Tzemach Tzedek goes on to ask another question first. The Gemara and the Halachic codifies determine that the mitzvah of tzedakah is properly fulfilled only if one gives a certain minimum, not less than 1/10 of one's earnings. So we mentioned that last week, towards the end of the last session, that there is a mitzvah in its own right to give to Hashem back what he has given to us to be guardians of, and the amount we have to give back is 10% minimum, 20% desirable. And the way we give it back is to put it back into circulation through the act of giving, tzedakah, giving to those in need, to causes as such. Accordingly, if one made numerous charitable contributions, then even though on each occasion he effected a wonderful supernal union above and drew down supreme life to this world, he nevertheless did not perform the mitzvah in its most complete form unless he tithed. So, if we are giving as part of our meiser, giving 1/10 minimum, we don't complete that mitzvah until 1/10 is reached. And yet, each element of giving has value in its own right. So isn't it ironical, he's going to say, that a whole mitzvah of Meiser is incomplete until the last amount sent, making up the 10% of your income, net income, is actually given. Yet, each act is already able to elicit an amazing response from above. Conversely, if he gave a tenth or a fifth of his earnings at one time, and thereby brought about a supertal union only once, he'd nevertheless fulfill the mitzvah properly. So you give 10% in one foul swoop. You say, I'm earning $50,000, I'm going to give $5,000 right now. You've done the whole mitzvah of giving Meiser in one go, a full amount. And yet, if you were giving it piece by piece, you'd be carrying out many mitzvahs in the interim. So how is this possible to combine together conceptually? How can this be? Why should he be deemed to have fulfilled his obligation better than his friend whose repeated charitable activity, though totaling less than Meiser, less than a tithe, recharged this world with renewed spiritual energy on so many occasions? So you've done the whole mitzvah in one shot. Fantastic. So how does that compare to someone who takes time by giving little by little, yet each little also has an amazing response? So you may give it in 1,000 parts and get 1,000 responses. And yet if you give it a one go, yes, you've done the mitzvah, but you've only done it once to elicit that response. How is it that in one case a mitzvah is completed, in the other case it seems to be less than that? In order to resolve this, the Tzemach Tzedek introduces two themes which he expounds at length, but which will be mentioned here only briefly. And here comes a complicated subject matter. The value of numbers and the value of letters. Value of letters, Aleph being 1, Beit being 2, up to Yud being 10, and up to Chaf then being 20, and after Kuf then being 100. Each letter has a particular value as such. Now, using this numerical scheme that we spoke about, of the Hebrew letters, in terms of the value 1, 20, 10, 100, etc., we're now going to understand a little more, and I'm jumping ahead to what the Tzemach Tzedek explains, see the paragraph, that by giving tzedakah in single-digit amount, one is only able to illuminate this lowly world with the level of spirituality that is alluded by a single-digit number. In other words, when we give that kind of tzedakah in single-digit amounts, then that goes to the world of Asiya, receiving its energy from above, but that energy is nowhere near as great, while when one gives a double-digit amount, $10, 10 cents, one draws down an illumination that is alluded to by double-digit numbers, Yetzirah, and so on. When one gives in the hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands, the larger the amount, that much greater is the commensurate spirituality that is drawn down. So we're hinting a little bit about the value of the amount that we give. That yet doesn't solve our contradiction as to the relative mitzvah worth of doing one mitzvah completely, giving tzedakah, vis-a-vis giving a large amount, giving this one many times and doing this once. Yes, there's a difference in terms of some of the energy flow, but what about the value of the mitzvah itself each time doing something? So we're going to leave the class at this point, and we're going to continue next week. It's getting nice and exciting, and I want to wish you a good Shabbos and a good week following. May we all be healthy and well. Bye.